The throne room of Arathos was a tomb of shadows and whispering echoes. Once vibrant tapestries clung in faded tatters, their depictions of heroic dragon slayers warped by dust and time. Prince Aleron hated the quiet that clung to the room, a stark contrast to the roar of battle he craved. "The Western holds report tremors again." Aleron's voice scraped like a rusty blade across the silence. His scarred hand clenched on the arm of the throne, the empty seat beside him a phantom weight. His father, the king, lay entombed in the royal sepulchre, the victim of an assassin's tainted blade. And the whispers, they speak of wyrms. Sir Edric, the knight commander, shifted his armoured bulk uneasily. "Rumours, your highness. The tales of frightened peasants." Aleron scoffed, pacing across the cracked marble floor. He longed for the clash of steel, the press of bodies against his shield. Instead, he was trapped in this dying kingdom, a prince without purpose, tethered to responsibility by invisible chains. The ranger, Lyra, emerged from the shadows, her elven eyes gleaming with an unnerving intensity. "The whispers are a symptom, Prince Aleron. Rot seeps into the land. I've felt it in the heart of the ancient forests, a stirring beneath the earth. The wyrms are legends, relics of a bygone age." Edric's tone was a harsh dismissal, tinged with desperation. "Legends crafted in blood and fire." Aleron caught Lyra's gaze, an uneasy alliance shimmering between them. The elven kingdoms had been Arathos' bitter enemies for centuries, yet now an unseen terror bound them together. Edric's jaw worked, his weathered face grim. "What do you propose, my prince?" Aleron clenched his fists, nails biting into his palms. Desperation clawed at his pride, forcing the words from his lips. "I go to the Heartlands." Gasps echoed through the crumbling throne room. The Heartlands, an ancient caldera pockmarked by the scars of the Dragon War, were a desolate wasteland. To enter was to invite death, or worse, madness. Yet Aleron met their shock with grim resolve. His nightmares were filled not with steel or blood, but with whispers coiling like serpents around his heart, promising darkness and terrible power. If the worm stirred, if the kingdom was to survive, he needed to face his inner demons beneath the shadow of the Wyrmheart. Aleron's preparation was swift and Spartan. He shunned the ornate armour of his lineage, opting instead for the hardened leather and unadorned steel of a veteran ranger. The whispers clung to him as they journeyed, a poisonous caress on his mind promising strength at the cost of sanity. At his side was Lyra, her steps as light as a falling leaf. Where he saw a bleak, blighted land, she saw the tenacious pulse of life clinging to the barren rock. "The first guardians lie here," she murmured, gesturing towards an ancient stone circle jutting from the ash-laden soil. The battle against the wyrms began not with might, but with knowledge. Edric grunted, his disapproval heavy in the silence. The stalwart knight clung to the belief that the Wyrmheart was a fable, the tremors and rumours no more than the death throes of a fading kingdom. Aleron understood the comfort of denial, had sought it himself. In the blasted epicentre of the Heartlands, remnants of a mighty fortress glowered at the ash-choked sky. Crumbling walls bore the marks of dragon claws, the aira miasma of sulphur and ancient blood. It was here their small company encountered her, a woman cloaked in tattered robes, her gaunt face marked with sigils that glowed with an unsettling light. "You seek what sleeps," she rasped, her voice like wind whistling through a crypt. "But it is not the wyrms you should fear." "Who are you?" Aleron demanded, sword half-drawn. "A remnant, a keeper of lost knowledge." She gestured towards the ravaged ruins. "The dragon slayers of old did not rely on strength alone. Here lies a weapon, one the wyrms could not corrupt." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "There are no weapons against the wyrms, only seals and bindings." The woman's thin lips curled into a humourless smile. "Pride is the first binding to break, young elf. This is a weapon of the mind, forged in desperation and wisdom." Aleron hesitated. Each tremor of the ground echoed through him, a dark counterpoint to the maddening whispers slithering in his mind. His birthright, his name, meant nothing in this desolate place. He was simply a man with a sword facing an ancient evil. "Lead us," Aleron said, his voice low and firm. The woman, a spectre amidst the ruins, inclined her head and slipped deeper into the broken fortress. They descended into the labyrinthine heart of the ruins, the air growing heavy and oppressive with each step. Ancient runes flickered on the dust-covered walls, their unknown language a chilling testament to the power that once dwelled here. Lyra's brow furrowed in concentration, fingers tracing the faded sigils. "Draconic," she hissed. "Crude translations. Warnings." Edric scoffed, a flicker of fear in his eyes. "Warnings against what, elf? Ghosts?" The woman who led them paused before a chamber sealed with a massive stone door inscribed with intricate sigils. "Within lies the weapon," she rasped, her eyes glittering feverishly. "But knowledge has its price. Are you prepared to pay?" Aleron met Edric's wary gaze, then Lyra's, whose eyes held a strange urgency. His hand tightened on his sword hilt, a familiar weight against the insidious whispers coiling around his thoughts. "We came here for answers," he said, his voice thick, "for a way to save our kingdom." The woman's cracked lips twisted into a semblance of a smile. "Then the price must be paid. Each of you must look into the abyss and understand what claws at its heart." With a guttural groan, she pressed her hands against the sigils. They flared with blinding light, the air crackling with strange, discordant energy. Aleron felt a surge, like lightning coursing through his veins, followed by a sickening lurch as the world fractured around him. He was falling? Or flying? Time ceased to have meaning as visions assaulted him. He saw Arathos burning, its people devoured by monstrous shadows. He saw himself wreathed in darkness, a tyrant ruling over a ruined world. And beneath it all the whispers pulsed like a grotesque heartbeat, promising power, dominion, oblivion. He awoke with a strangled gasp, heart pounding against his ribs. Lyra knelt over him, her normally cool eyes filled with concern. Edric stood stiffly, his face ashen, but the woman was gone, vanished like a wisp of smoke. What was that?" Edric's voice cracked, the stoic knight shaken to his core. Aleron forced himself to his feet, a tremor rippling through him. He could still feel the echoes of the vision lingering, a chilling glimpse of potential futures. "A warning," Lyra whispered, her gaze fixed on the sealed chamber. "The wyrms are not our only enemy." With their minds reeling, they forced open the heavy stone door. The chamber beyond was surprisingly Spartan, a circular room dominated by a smooth obsidian slab that shimmered with an unsettling luminescence. Hieroglyphs, stark and angular, covered the slab's surface. "This is it? This slab is the weapon?" Edric scoffed, his voice laced with a desperate disbelief. "Knowledge is the most potent weapon of all, knight," Lyra countered, running her slender fingers lightly over the glyphs. This is a conduit, a way to see, to understand." As she traced the symbols, the obsidian flared with a blinding radiance. Aleron shielded his eyes, an echoing cry ringing in his ears. It wasn't a sound he heard with his ears, but rather a reverberation deep within his own fractured mind. An image took shape before him, a colossal creature, its scales gleaming obsidian black, rising from a molten pit, the ground shattered beneath its claws, the sky weeping tears of blood. He staggered back, the whispers swelling to a deafening roar. This was no myth, no legend. The wyrms were real, and their awakening would paint the world in ash. But it was more than just the sight of the monstrous beast that chilled him to the bone. It was the realization that echoed in the depths of his soul. The wyrms were potent vessels of destruction, but they were not the true enemy. "I understand now," Aleron rasped, his voice barely above a whisper. "The abyss, it lies within us. The whispers, they prey on our doubts, our fears. They turn our strength into shadows." Lyra nodded slowly, her eyes filled with a bitter wisdom. "The true battleground is not the blasted lands, but the landscape of our own hearts." "So this slab," Edric's face was strained, "it shows us our worst fears, is that it?" "It shows us the darkness we might become if we yield," Aleron said. He gestured at the obsidian surface. "This is a weapon, but one forged in self-knowledge." The knight remained silent. Aleron could see the struggle playing out on his face, the pride, the fear, the stubborn adherence to tradition. Finally, Edric exhaled, his broad shoulders slumping. "Show me, then. Show me the monster I carry in my heart." One by one they stood before the obsidian slab. Lyra, steeled against the visions, sought not fear, but the strength of her ancestral bond with the wounded world. Each saw glimpses of their own potential darkness, the twisting paths their lives could take. Yet each also witnessed the flickering flame of hope, the enduring strength of the human spirit against the encroaching shadows. Edric, ever the pragmatist, saw the consequences of his rigid adherence to duty, the way his single-mindedness could be twisted into a cold, unfeeling cruelty. He witnessed a future where Arathos was a hollow husk, its people crushed under the heel of an unyielding order. When he opened his eyes, they burned with a fierce new determination, etched with the painful knowledge that there was more to leadership than unwavering obedience. Yet it was Aleron's vision that held them all in a heart-clenching silence. The whispers that plagued him found fertile ground in the obsidian mirror. He saw the intoxicating allure of the darkness, the twisted promise of dominion over a shattered world. He saw himself enthroned as a tyrant, his shadow engulfing the land. When he awoke from the trance, there was a new stillness about him. The whispers were muted, replaced not by silence, but by a strange acceptance. That is the true enemy, he choked out, meeting their eyes squarely. It is not the wyrms we face, but the darkness in our own hearts. A flicker of understanding passed between Lyra and the knight. The dragon slayers of old had to understand the creature they fought, Lyra said quietly. Perhaps in understanding ourselves we find the way to fight the true battle. Aleron looked again at the obsidian expanse, at the echoes of the terrible visions they had endured. In every darkness, he said, his voice stronger now, tempered in the forge of his own self-examination, there exists a flicker of light. It might be small, easily extinguished, but it is that flicker we must nurture. Hope, fragile and defiant, bloomed in the desolate heartlands. The ground beneath their feet still trembled, the whispers still whispered, but a new clarity had been forged. They left the ruins with heavy hearts yet resolute spirits, understanding now that the greatest battleground lay not in the scarred physical world, but in the ever-shifting territory of the human soul. The path back to Arathos was a sombre trek, punctuated by low conversations laden with uncomfortable revelations. Each of them had faced their inner demons, the shadows festering in their hearts. The weight of this knowledge hung heavy, a counterpoint to the urgency of their mission. As they neared the borders, they found their path blocked by a grim spectacle. A makeshift barricade, fashioned from broken spears and tattered banners, marked the remnants of a desperate battle. Arathos soldiers lay strewn across the field, their armour rent, their eyes wide with the terror of their final moments. "Orcs!" Edric spat, his voice laced with disgust. The barbaric horde had long been a plague on the kingdom's borders, but never had they ventured this far inland. This was not a random raid, but a calculated strike, as if something or someone was driving them on. Lyra knelt beside a fallen soldier, brushing aside his matted hair to reveal a crude brand seared into his flesh, a twisting serpentine symbol. "They are marked," she said, her voice grim. "The whispers reach far." Aleron's stomach twisted with a dreadful certainty. The whispers he had long believed to be a taint in his own mind now took a monstrous shape. The enemy was amorphous, insidious, capable of corrupting the very hearts of their foes. The survivors cowered in the shadow of a ruined watchtower, their eyes haunted. A wounded captain limped toward them, disbelief battling despair on his bloodied face. "Prince Aleron!" he gasped. "You return, but it is too late. They came from below, from tunnels burrowing like worms in the night. The citadel. It is lost." Aleron felt the ground tilt beneath his feet. Arathos, the seat of his father's power, the last bastion of their wounded kingdom, fallen. The whispers in his mind throbbed, echoing his despair. "We retake it," he declared, his voice cutting through the chilling silence. Arathos might be wounded, but its heart still beat. He would not let the shadows claim his inheritance, his people. He was no longer a haunted prince, but a leader tempered in the fires of the heartlands. Reclaiming Arathos was a brutal struggle, a desperate clash of wills amidst the crumbling splendour of their ancestors. For every orc they felled, 2 more rose in their place, their eyes burning with a feral madness. The whispers became a cruel refrain echoing in every desperate cry, every echoing clang of steel upon steel. Aleron fought with a clarity honed in the obsidian heart of the Wyrmlands. Each strike was not fuelled merely by rage or despair, but by a quiet determination to extinguish the encroaching darkness. Edric, shaken from his complacency, was a whirlwind of steel, his staunch defence a beacon of hope for their beleaguered soldiers. Even Lyra, her arrows tipped with ancient elven enchantments, danced a deadly ballet through the ranks of their foes, every twang of her bowstring a hymn of resistance. Yet in the throne-room-turned-slaughterhouse they found the true architect of their despair. The woman who had led them into the Wyrmheart knelt beside a pulsing fissure in the earth, her eyes glowing with a sickening light. Orcs writhed at her feet like grotesque puppets, their tortured cries echoing off the shattered tapestries. "You see now, Prince," the woman rasped, her once gaunt form now pulsing with unholy power. "Darkness is strength. Dominion is salvation." Aleron's heart twisted with a sickening certainty. The whispers slithering through the carnage were a reflection of her own tainted soul. It was not the worms who sought to consume the world, but humanity, twisting and corrupting itself into a monstrous echo of its former glory. "We choose the light," he roared through gritted teeth, hefting his battered shield. "Even in the deepest chasm, light endures." The battle that ensued was unlike any war they had waged before. It was a confrontation of ideologies, of wills. With every orcish blade that shattered on Edric's shield, every arrow that found its mark in corrupted flesh, they defied the darkness. And when Aleron finally stood before the corrupted woman, his blade stained crimson, it was not vengeance that drove him, but a profound sorrow for what she had become. Yet the battle for Arathos was a victory forged in sacrifice and blood. As they surveyed the ravaged throne room, the silence seemed to press down like a physical weight. They had pushed back the encroaching shadows, but at a terrible cost. In the aftermath there was no joyous celebration. The fallen were laid to rest with solemn rites, their names whispered as prayers amidst the ruins. The whispers still lingered, a haunting echo of the darkness they had faced. Yet there was a change. The desperate fear-laden edge to them had blunted. Amidst the grief and exhaustion a new purpose bloomed. The whispers were a symptom of a deeper illness, a corruption seeping into the world, into their very hearts. They could not afford to wait, to hope the worms were mere legend. The alliance they had forged in fear must now be tempered into a weapon of hope. Aleron surveyed the ragged remnants of his troops, their faces etched with the weight of loss, yet grimly resolute. Beside him, Edric stood straight-backed, his weathered visage radiating a new-found determination. Lyra's gaze was fixed on the distant horizon, as if seeing paths unseen to others. He cleared his throat, his voice hoarse but unwavering. "Arathos has bled, but it will not die. We must look beyond our borders, forge alliances against this rising darkness. Elves, dwarves, all those who cling to the light, we will unite them." A ripple ran through the gathered soldiers, a mix of disbelief and a flaring spark of hope. Edric spoke, his voice a steady rumble. "The knightly orders have stood apart too long. We will lay down our old oaths and swear anew to stand united against this threat." Lyra smiled then, a rare sight that lit her normally stern visage. "The forests have sung of this darkness. The elven kingdoms will answer, though it takes centuries of mistrust to overcome. It would be a hard, thankless journey. The old rivalries ran deep, the wounds of past wars still festering. But as Aleron looked at this unlikely band of survivors, the haunted prince, replaced by a leader forged in self-knowledge and sacrifice, he felt an odd surge of certainty. The whispers were a relentless foe, the worms an unseen nightmare. But in every act of defiance, every bond forged between long-standing enemies, every heart that resisted the encroaching shadow, there lay the kernel of hope. Their war had only just begun.